only beyond Hong Kong, far beyond Hong Kong. She's known not only for obviously a great business career, but for her passion for culture, Chinese culture, and the arts, and education, and many interests indeed, including let's look at some of them. I know you've probably read this, but a great commitment to public service through committee work and other things such as town planning, cutting government red tape, environmental issues in business. And she's also spent some time working with the underprivileged in Hong Kong and in Canada as well. She is here tonight, of course, to talk about the book, Y.K. Pao, My Father, and that's why we are here. You're not here to listen to me. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Anna to start the book talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your introduction. If I may be allowed to sit here and talk, because after all, I am a certain age and have a license. But ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here again. It was a while back since I was at Hong Kong U lecturing under Dean Kavan, and at the social work department as well as the psychology department. And so I had fond memories of Hong Kong University. Today, I'm going to talk a bit more about my father rather than myself. And I wrote this book because I'm not a writer. It's my first attempt in writing, so you have to give me a little bit of leeway in all the mistakes I make in the book. I'm going into second print, but I wrote this book really to document what I call a Hong Kong spirit, and that is the can-do spirit, which has really mean a lot to all of you and us. And it's the success story of Hong Kong. Y.K. Pao came in 1949 with absolutely nothing, no money, and certainly no Cantonese language, no friends. He brought his family with him. He came from Shanghai, and this is a picture of him. He's on the right-hand side, the fifth one. I can't stand up because of this. The middle short person to the right is the manager. He was the deputy manager of the Shanghai Municipal Bank. He brought with him his wife, his young bride, and two babies, two children, including one was me. And he was working at in a tiny little office. I think basically he started with about 3 desks and 5 persons. And so they were his friends from China, and they took turns in sitting at the desk. Some go out, and some work in the desk, at their desk. But it was a time he did import and export. And of course, when it's all friends, they were not exactly all kept busy at the same rate. Next one. This was his connection with Hong Kong U when he got his honorary doctorate degree. Next. This is the first ship he bought. After World War II, Japan had to rebuild, thus creating an opportunity for sea transportation, which my father seized. He bought his first ship, and in 1955, and this is about a second, or even, it could have been even third-hand, coal burner. And he named it Golden Alpha, quite rightly, being his first ship. It was named Alpha. And from then on, but when he bought this, he had really very little money. And I was very fortunate to have the opportunity of getting onto this ship. It was moored in the Hong Kong harbor, and some of you would remember the little boats called the Walla Walla boat, which took us to the side of the boat, and we had to climb onto the boat by those rope ladder. And in my book, I accounted how he said to me, "What a boy can do, you can do." So up you go along the rope ladder. And little did I know when I first landed on this ship that he would have really developed very quickly. By 1962, he had his first ship, new ship, built in Japan, in Hakodate, the Northern Ireland. And the shipyard actually since then had been closed. But this was the first ship, and I had the fortune to be asked to name the ship. I was only 14 years of age, and it was very interesting. But thinking back since 1949, when he first landed in Hong Kong, it was a very sleepy fishing village. And how would this little backwater of an island, Hong Kong, dream that it would be put on a world map through this little refugee, insignificant. So by 1970, in the brief 15 years since he bought his first ship, Golden Alpha, he was on the Newsweek cover, and he was named the King of Sea. So Hong Kong was also put on the map. Next. Hong Kong was put on the map because in this 15 years, as you see in this chart, these are the top 10 ship owners in the world. And this was an account on the right-hand side. This graph was shown in Gibson Shipbrokers publication. He was by far the top ship owner. His fleet was next to the Russian Navy. So you can see Onassis there is only less than a third of his tonnage. And C.Y. Tung, who's the father of C.H. Tung, is 4.5 million tons. My father was, even when he was named the King of the Sea, in Newsweek, they described him as extremely boring. He was boring because he had no women in his life. When the journalist asked him about his private life, he said, "I have 5 women, my wife and 4 daughters." That's quite colorful enough. And he certainly doesn't have collections of porcelain like some of the other ship owners, who's not named here, who has large private collections of art or porcelain. My father's only interest was skipping rope every day in the morning and swimming every day. Then he went to work, and then he came home. He had dinner with his business associates, and outside of that, he had no other interests except work. He skipped rope, I think, because he wanted to be fitter for his work. He swam so he could work harder. So his whole life was revolved around his work. And he took a very conservative style. He adopted a model that was more a banker's model, which is very, very steady. So at that time, if you remember, in the 60s, Suez Canal was closed. And so the ships had to go around Cape Town in order to get to anywhere else. And so it was a lot of oil in the Middle East were transported around the Cape Town to the Far East, to USA. And this sort of route, of course, was golden opportunity for earning money. The charter rate was changing every day. Instead of taking advantage of a daily rate change, so in fact, just like renting your house, if your flat you rent changes the rate every day, can you imagine how much the landlord would earn? However, he didn't take that route. He took a long charter, sort of the route of a long charter. He would fix the long charter rate before he even ordered the ships. So he could be sure that there was rental, steady income. He was named to be a novice. People ridiculed him in the trade because there's money to be earned, and Mr. Y.K. Pao was rather stupid not to earn the money. Instead, he would take a low rate, but a long term. So his ships were all chartered sort of for 5 years and minimum, some of them 10 years. And then in the late 70s, when there was a huge downturn in the economy, he was the lucky one. He survived the downturn. This kind of trade was called shikumisan in Japanese, which means low rate, but long charter. He actually let the ships out bareboat charter, so he had minimum cost. But in the 1980s, he came out clean because, first of all, when he heard news, he got rid of a lot of tonnage. He sold his ships, and he told me, you know, in business, it's unemotional. You can't be attached. But you could probably remember the philosophy of C.Y. Tung was quite different. at that time because there was a Seawise University, because he was rather attached to the ship. He couldn't let go, and he turned the ship into a university, which was a brilliant idea. But from a cost point of view, the ships do rust, and the cost of maintaining a ship is tenfold a flat you have on land. So, but Y.K. Pao was always very conscious of balancing the books and balancing cost and outgoing. So he could survive the downturn very well. And he was named by, this is the Shipping and Trade Wind, which called him the shipping miracle maker, because he managed to survive. Japan Line went bust. C.Y. Tung's fleet also went bust, and it had to be rescued by China and HSBC next. Now, I had to put in this picture because there's a little anecdote. He was swimming in the Suez Canal. He would swim anywhere he had an opportunity. He was swimming in Yangtze River, just like his picture. But this picture was hung in a shipbroker's office in London. And I think Prince Philip went to visit this shipbroker. I think he was friend or something. And he said, "Who's this? Why do you put up a picture of this guy swimming in a shipping office?" He said, "Well, everybody else went belly up. This guy is still floating." So every successful business needed some backers, and that's the bankers. And I have this picture is taken when he was the director of HSBC. He was the first Chinese director in this British bank. And this picture was taken actually by my husband with all three chairmen of HSBC. But I had this little story to tell of his first loan. He was sitting outside Sir Jake Saunders' room for a whole week. And Sir Jake at that time was a chief accountant, said to his secretary, "Who's that Chinaman there?" And these were Sir Jake Saunders' words to me later on. He said, "I actually thought your father was just an ordinary Chinaman. But what a Chinaman." So he said he would see him. So my father saw him and asked about the loan for him to buy his first new ship. And of course, Sir Jake, being who he was very jolly, and he said, "Right, but what do you have as collateral?" And father said, you have never done business before. And my father said, "I'll get you an LC, letter of credit, and I'll get it from a Japanese bank." So Sir Jake said, "Well, okay, if you do." But of course, he knew that it was near impossible. So his promise was actually an empty promise. So he could easily give away that sort of friendly banker empty promise. Little did he dream that this Chinaman actually did manage to get the letter of credit from a Japanese bank. It was quite an opportunity too, because Japan had to rebuild, the bankers, the shipbuilders were all very keen for more export on to increase the foreign exchange. And of course, what father could bring to Japan was connections. At one point, Worldwide was building so many ships in Japan. Their new building department was nicknamed the Worldwide Department. And my father was made honorary citizen of Japan, which he passed on to his father. But having got the first loan, he was able to ride on its back. In fact, HSBC had become a great friend of Worldwide, and our joint venture, and it was also the first joint venture of China, together with the Chinese shipbuilding and also the a trade company. And father brought in HSBC as well as Bank of Japan to this formula of this first joint venture in China. And this was a great opportunity for HSBC to enter China. And at that time, this joint venture had also earned HSBC good money when the economy went sour in late 70s. Father was he was a visionary in terms of globalization. And in the late 60s, way before the word globalization was really coined, he was already practicing globalization. He had offices dotted about in London, in New York, in Japan, in Singapore, and he employed British captains, British engineers, marine architects, etc. But he hardly finished high school, let alone university. So YK Pao was his self-learned English was quite amazing because he managed to communicate with the engineer. He's a great learner, a great listener. So he was very keen to learn about shipping, which is a business he knew nothing about. His own father tried to prevent him in going into this business because it was high risk. The stake was high. So he had to prove himself. And in 1980s, he branched out into land. This was very strange because he was always against fixed asset. He liked moving asset. That's why he went into shipping. He had a refugee's mentality. He purchased Kowloon Wharf in 1980 and purchased Wheelock in 1983. He believed in working hard and being very thrifty, being a Ningponese. But he managed as a Ningponese, he helped out. He helped out his Ningponese friend and invested in Dragonair because Mr. Chow could not really fly or be licensed to operate in Hong Kong because as a colony, to operate an airline, one had to have a British passport. And Waikiki Pao had the British passport. So my husband was the first CEO of Dragonair, and his first flight crew, he trained his first flight crew. In fact, my husband's a great believer of women as well. So he employed the first, Dragonair actually employed the first female pilot. Now, Cathay had bought Dragonair and has several female pilots, but Dragonair actually had the first one. Next. Now I put this because this is the Jiapu, and this is the ancestral book. Now every village has an ancestry book. They discovered this ancestry book in Anhui, in Hefei, and it was actually transferred. Now it's being kept in Ningbo Tianyige, the library. The oldest library, if you ever have a chance to go to Ningbo, you must visit the Tianyige library, because, and also go and visit the stage at Tianyige. The stage is actually very charming, but the audience, the number of audience it seats is about 15, with a beautiful stage in the middle, and somehow reminds me of Elizabethan stages. Very intimate. But in there, to come back to this book, what it says really is Waikiki Pao is the 29th descendant of Judge Pao, Pao Gong. And so very fortunately, I'm the 30th. But Pao Gong is supposed to be very just in his judgments, and is likened to King Solomon's judgments. And it was displayed at the Hong Kong Library as well for a while. I think it went back to Ningbo already. I added this because I think perhaps whether it was in the genes or whether it was by chance, Father was very, very generous person. He never talked much. He never told me to whom he had donated or helped. But in my encounters in China, I just come across so many people who come to me and said, your father had helped me, and I'm most grateful. And he has, for Hong Kong, he has been a great philanthropist. He had given to all these. And Hong Kong University, he had also given to a clinic and also the psychology department. Next. And he had given to his, to China. These are quite interesting in that the first international hotel he gave, and the book will recount actually how he came up with the idea of donating to China to this Zhaolong hotel. And he had given it away, and I want to claim we don't get anything back for Zhaolong Hotel if I go there and stay. My secretaries and everybody else have to We all have to pay for that hotel. But it was the first and also the last hotel Deng Xiaoping attended personally. And there was a little story behind that, because my father said he would donate towards the hotel, and for 2 years, nothing, he heard nothing of it. And he went back and asked, why was it? And when he saw Deng Xiaoping, he mentioned about this. He said, I heard nothing about it. And then Deng Xiaoping investigated why was there not land design, nothing. He was told they didn't know how to accept the check because it was a capitalist check. And for a socialist country, how can you accept a capitalist check? So do you call that building a socialist building or a capitalist building? And that was when Deng Xiaoping said, as long as you catch the mice, whether it's a black cat or a white cat, it's a cat. And so he said, if nobody dares to stand out to accept the check, I will. And I will personally write the name of the hotel, and I will attend the opening of the hotel. And that's why he actually attended this. So it was quite a landmark in the modernization of China. Although it's quite dwarfed, the present building, if you go and look at it, it's quite dwarfed by all the beautiful hotels in Beijing. But it was the first step towards modernization of China. Can you go back to the previous one? And on the above right is the library of the Jiao Tong University. And this has a little story as well, because the money was given to the Ministry of Education. However, again, because of bureaucracy and so on, it was in the early 80s, and people didn't know how to handle it. And when the president of Jiao Tong University heard about it, who was not the president, but the Cai Shufan, who was the advisor, and he heard about it. He said, how about bringing the money to Shanghai, to the Jiao Tong University? So this library was built at Jiao Tong University. But interestingly enough, in those days, contrasted with the corruption nowadays, that money was given to one library. But they were so careful in designing and in spending the money. So there was no boxing in of the roof. There's no ceiling. The ceiling was all raw, all the pipes and things. They managed actually to save the money to build a second library in the outskirts of Shanghai. So the library now has two, the Jiao Tong University has two libraries, managed from the money of one. But that was in the early 80s. And of course, most of you had heard about Ningbo University, which was built, the whole university, because with the population in Ningbo, there was no university at that time. So he donated. And Zhejiang University, again, was the money was channeled from the Ministry of Education, to whom my father donated, and again, very bureaucratic, nothing got moving. And the president of Zhejiang University at that time was Lu Yongqiang, who became the president of the Academy of Science. And he was very entrepreneurial. He took the money, set up a scholarship scheme, which it sort of sent the first group of scholars for a PhD to United States. Next. Now, his generosity actually was quite touching. At the 100th anniversary of Deng Xiaoping, at the convention center, I attended the evening function. And Deng Xiaoping's daughter, Deng Rong, revealed that evening a story that I never knew. He said many years ago, after the Cultural Revolution, his brother was thrown from, I think, from the 3rd floor and broke his leg. They were very poor, but they had a friend in Canada who was willing to, who had a way of fixing his leg. And so, but the only thing is, they didn't have money to go to Canada. So via an intermediary, the word got to YK Pao that this young man needed a ticket to go to Canada. At that time, my father didn't know who the young man was. He didn't know who Deng Xiaoping was either. The name was never revealed to him. He was just told there was a young man who needed help after the Cultural Revolution, and please, can you contribute an airplane ticket? And so my father gave that ticket. It wasn't much, Deng Rong said, but it was very touching that he was willing to help a stranger. And years later, after it was in the early 80s actually, that my father was invited back to China. And the story was never told, somehow it was never bridged, but the Deng family became very good friends with our family. It wasn't until a few years back that Deng Rong told the story. But this is a picture of us, typical of our family gatherings with Deng Xiaoping. And that's my uncle, my husband, myself on the right-hand side, and his granddaughter. And this relationship became very deep. My father saw Deng Xiaoping a great deal. During the early 80s, and they were, when they were discussing a lot about free market, my father was explaining in simple terms about how interest rates can affect the economy. He was explaining about a lot of economic terms and how the world goes around with how to balance a book. But most memorable conversation I remember was his explaining, because when we view each other, there's always a Chinese cup with a cover, with a lid. And my father, because I always went with him, my father, to see all these leaders, world leaders. And my father was explaining, well, what the planned economy means, you have to worry about the workers' pay, you have to worry about the production line and the production number, and you have to worry about the workers' compensation and their unemployment and their old age pension. He said, well, once if you drive, you let go and put money in the pockets of the consumers, let them drive the economy. They would, the consumer would worry about the production line. And he said, if you follow that policy, one day you will find that the consumer are busting the front door of the department store to buy this cup. You don't have to worry a thing. And it really came true, actually, in the early 90s. In fact, the department stores just had so many people rushing into the shops to purchase. And this was the China's modernization. And it was in these days that Deng was impregnated with the idea of market economy. And in fact, these were subsequently, after these conversations, he went down to Shenzhen, and the rest is history. However, the two of them meet are quite comical because one speaks with Sichuan accent, the Putonghua. Neither of them speak Putonghua properly. And the other one spoke Ningpo accent. I mean, half the time, you could hardly understand what they were talking about. But it was the reading of each other's mind was quite amazing, whether it was because they came from the same kind of background, having gone through the turmoils of Japanese occupation, having gone through the world wars, having gone through being totally defeated to the zero level and come back again, and surviving all these ups and downs of the Chinese history, that they develop a common language. Next. Father, without his English, as I had said, it was quite amazing how he went around the world meeting all these leaders. He managed to talk to all these people, met everybody, talking about the market economy. He talked about free trade. He talked about pluralism in airlines. When he talked, he was always very concise. He had the key words. So I sometimes wonder why I have to use so many words when he could convey himself, the meanings, with such precision. He made friends with many people, including there are many Japanese, all the Japanese prime ministers he had met, and with Ronald Reagan. I put these pictures because Ronald Reagan was one of the messengers he had used, which I will tell later. And this picture with the Saudi prince, it was this meeting which led him to believe that the oil market was increasing. The price of oil per barrel was increasing, and he actually made the decision to start selling his ships. And from hundreds of ships in his fleet, he managed to get rid of them to about 20 ships in time for the crash. It was quite amazing that he could pick it up, but he could also let it go. Next. His friendship was not only with Deng, and in this he had great friendship with Margaret Thatcher. He had her years, so to speak. The story of how he got her to do the ship naming was, this was taken at Harland and Wolff, the shipyard, when Margaret Thatcher was to close all the shipyards, and that meant heavy bleeding in terms of employment. And the story went that my father realized there was difficulties in the Sino-British talks. We went through a period, if you remember, Mrs. Thatcher wouldn't let go of Hong Kong. Mrs. Thatcher was trying to give away the sovereignty, but not the administration, and wanted to keep on the administration of Hong Kong. And Deng Xiaoping was not going to hear any of that. So there were differences, and she had just won the wars in Argentina. She was very, very adamant she was going to win this battle as well. So she wasn't going to give in. Father saw this, and he went to see Mrs. Thatcher. And I was right next to him. He had this huge box of present, and I was a bit worried. I said, I don't think the Prime Minister is going to accept the gift. But he had this big gift, and he gave it to Mrs. Thatcher, and Mrs. Thatcher said, "Oh, in Britain, civil servants cannot receive gifts." He said, "Open it, and then you decide whether to accept the gift." He opened there was a lot of tissue paper, and inside was a skipping rope. And Mrs. Thatcher certainly enjoyed that humor a lot. And she said, "What was that for?" And Mr. Pao said, "Well, being a leader of a country, you must keep fit. I skip every morning, and that's very good for your heart. And take any pressure." She should have taken up his advice. Maybe she wouldn't have suffered Alzheimer's disease. However, she took that, and Y.K. Pao said, "Well, the real reason I came to see you is to give you another gift. I have signed a contract with Harland and Wolff for a ship built in Britain. But it is absolutely foolish as a businessman. But this is a Christmas present to you." I say it's foolish because it costs a lot more, have no certainty of the finish date. There's always union action, and every day of delay costs a lot of money to my business, but I'm going to give this business to you because I hold a British passport, and as a British citizen, knowing you have difficulties with shipyards, this is my present. Mrs. Thatcher could have kissed him right then and there if she weren't so in her position. She had to maintain certain decorum. So she was near tears. Mr. Pao was very quick on the uptake. There are some conditions attached to this contract. One, you have to go to name the ship. That's no problem. That's in UK, so she did that. That's the picture she had. And to tell you, actually, I was at the ship naming, and it was quite symbolic. Chinese, what do you call it? Not feng shui, but some yu gam or whatever it was. Mrs. Thatcher was throwing the bottle of champagne like 2 or 3 times. She was really furious. The bottle bounced back, unbroken. So of course, that's not very good luck for the people on the ship. It's supposed to break the first time. So she was very annoyed. But finally, she did all right. The second request YK Pao wanted her to do, she said, I had ordered a ship of the same type, same specification in Shanghai. Can you go and name that ship as well? And she turned her head to her assistant, then her, not assistant, her, that was her first officer, who was Sir Charles Pole. And he was very hesitant because as a leader of a country, you never go to another country to support the heavy industry of another country. So normally one doesn't go. But Mrs. Thatcher was so moved by his gesture of building a ship in England, in UK, she said, yes, I will do so. And Mr. Pao said, the real reason I want you to go to Shanghai is I want you to see China in an unofficial capacity. Because every time you go there, you go to Beijing, and you have a whole row of diplomats on your side facing the Chinese diplomat. The two have to maintain face. So you have a stance, they have a stance. And it's always formal. This time, let me arrange it. It's informal. So it was her first time to go to visit China beyond Beijing, and for her to get a feeling of how China was opening up, modernizing, and going at full speed economically. Next. So he was very, very arduous in courting Mrs. Thatcher, including this is the SINO British Friendship Scholarship Scheme, which YK Pao had thought of, and it was right after Margaret Thatcher went to Shanghai. If you can recall, when she sort of slipped and fell at the People's Congress in Beijing, that was when he decided to give up Hong Kong. and sign the treaty. Actually, in between, there was a lot of visits my father made to Chevening to visit Lord Geoffrey Howe, and he also met with Douglas Hurd. He met with a number of people, and Sir Percy Cradock, who was the special envoy in the negotiation of the return of Hong Kong to China. He managed to persuade everybody except Mrs. Thatcher, who was quite determined. But finally, she gave in because he also offered, he said, when you sign this, the return of Hong Kong back to China, I have another idea. We're going to send a lot of Chinese students to Britain to study. And it is, the portion is one, the Chinese government, the Y.K. Pao himself, and the British government all chip into this fund to create this scholarship scheme. It was the duration of 10 years, and he had actually nurtured about 1,800 students. Now, all the students from China are holding very key positions, including the Tsinghua University president in Shenzhen, the branch. There's also Zhejiang University president, and so on and so forth. And but this was again very significant to Britain, because that was a time when Britain cut off all the foreign student scholarship, if you can remember. And the universities it was very controversial, because the universities were losing some of the brightest lot of students. And so this scheme was a welcome news for a lot of universities. Well, I have to say this to Mrs. Thatcher, who had passed away now. All three of them had passed away. To Mrs. Thatcher, I would have to say that she can rest in peace. She shouldn't regret anymore, because subsequent to the joint declaration, every time she saw me, the first sentence she said to me was, "I'm very sorry to the people of Hong Kong. I had no choice." And she was very regretful for having made that decision. But I have to tell her now, she shouldn't regret, because we're doing fine in Hong Kong. We have the SIPA, we have all the Chinese tourists coming to Hong Kong to help with our shops, and they're also coming to buy all the milk powder. So we're doing fine. And to Y.K. Pao, to my father, I would have said he was very creative in solving some of the critical issues at stake politically, as well as to maintaining his position to his new home in Hong Kong, as well as doing a service to his motherland. To Deng Xiaoping, I have to say that his modernization is amazing. We can all witness that within 30 years, China has traveled a whole century. What had taken the Western countries a whole century to develop, China has gone through industrialization in 30 years. So to these three persons who are self-made men and women, I have to thank for Hong Kong being what we are now. And I have to say the legacy of YK Pao is his can-do spirit, his ingenious creativity in business and in diplomacy, his compassion for fellow men, his upright morals, his positive attitude and pragmatic approach, his great sense of right and wrong, and above all, his sense of humor and charisma. Shipping is what he left behind. One sector, you read about Wolf and Willock in the newspaper, so I don't need to talk about it much. But the other sector, which doesn't see the newspaper very often, is the shipping side. And worldwide has become Bergeson world. And what you have seen earlier in the chart, the 4.4 million ton shipping company, Bergeson, was the largest, the world's largest gas carrier company, was purchased by our company in 2003. But prior to that was 1999, when Worldwide bought the Swedish company, Nordstrom and Tulin. Now, when we try to buy the Bergeson, actually in the newspaper in Norway, they said the Oriental pirates have come to try to buy our national flag. Because these Nordic countries, whether Sweden or Norway, they really live by transportation. So when an Asian company come to buy their company, they were very emotionally upset. So the newspaper was very negative. And my husband and my son made sure they stay at the 3-star hotel, walked to the office every day, shook hands with every single member of the company, and in 1 year time, the newspaper, the tone of the newspaper changed. The Sohmen family is not so bad. They're very humble, very modest, and the rest of the shareholder actually let go of their shares and let us purchase the company. Now, in December, this is not insider trading, it's already in the news, you can Google and get the news, that this company, part of the business, which is offshore, is going to be listed in Norway in December. And this is so the shipping company from YK Pao's day, which was really dealing with transportation of oil, we have branched out to transportation of gas, natural gas, and also liquefied petroleum gas. And and also the offshore business, which is floating island. What we do differently from other businesses, they actually build a little platform. We use the old ships and turn them into little islands and store oil before they are offloaded by ships. To continue YK Pao's legacy, my son and I have started this school. This is, you will see, this is actually a commission painting by Wang Yan, the artist, YK Pao School. The school is founded on Chinese culture, and that's why we have these little Chinese landscape in this. It's integrated. This school is not an international school. I was one of the founders of the Chinese International School some 30 years back, but I started this school in Shanghai simply because I feel that it's high time that China also have a school that expounds some of the ideas I have about how to bring up children. And we believe very much in a balanced, all-rounded education. So we emphasize sports, art, music just as much as our academics. We are a Chinese school because we use the Chinese curriculum, which is very good, the mainland curriculum, but we add on the Western approach. So in Chinese, our name is 鲍玉刚实验学校 实验学校 because I regard ourselves as a living laboratory in education because we always put different additives. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. So we try to change in our approach little bit by little bit. This is our newest campus in outside of Shanghai. Our primary school is a day school. Our secondary school is a boarding school. Why boarding? Because we feel that the day is longer for the children actually to learn to get along with each other, and this is what's so important, is the people skill. In fact, all of you would agree with me, when you leave school, only very little bits of the school education can be applied to the real life. Most of it is outside the books, outside the classroom, how to get along with different kinds of people, how to communicate. And so, can you go back to this is the library. And in the library, I just got the idea when I arrived here, this is the heart of the school, and I actually designed this school, the library, myself. Can you go back to a few? Is there another one? Another one? This one. This is the great room as we entered, and I designed it with a there's a fixed 4 column which we couldn't move, and we have the 4 oldest civilization in the world. So this is the hieroglyphic, the Chinese, the Egyptians, and don't move, the Indian, and the Mesopotamia. And in the center is a skylight, which I put the 3 core values of our school, is integrity, compassion, and balance. Balancing a personal desire to play and schoolwork, and we're always in positions, in situations where we have to make a choice, and we have to balance the family need and your work need. And it is round. I have made it round, and the middle is square, where the integrity is. And basically, I believe the Chinese coin design, it's 内方外圆. And in the Chinese believe that the earth is square and the sky is round. I mean the the ancient belief. And this has become a sign that I thought was very appropriate, because the academics is in the middle, which is the integrity, which you can't move. It's fixed. There's certain curriculum one has to cover, and the circle around it can be sports, art, creativity, and all the other subjects. The middle here is the design of the Roman amphitheater, which is repeated in the garden. Can we go to the garden? I just built this summer the amphitheater in the garden, in the back garden. It's the 2 wings are sort of classrooms, and this is and go back, and the pictures actually is the sound absorbent boards. This is Trinity College in Ireland. Next. This is Trinity College. This is Tianyige, the oldest library in China. And when I look for the pictures of the interior, I have another picture of the Congress Library on the other side. So I had Trinity College, Congress Library, and Tianyige, the Chinese library. And when I come to the Tianyige, I couldn't find a photograph of the interior. You know, it's just a little cabinet with some books and another cabinet with some books. I said, surely, with all these Chinese scholars, I mean, just these few cabinets instead of rows and rows of shelves of books. Why so? Then I discover the Chinese scholar actually is made in the garden. So the Tianyige's garden is very, very peaceful, and it has a lot of bamboos. So I have a lot of bamboos in our library garden as well. And if you recall, the Chinese scholar actually holding the book, and they are reciting. So everything is in their head so much, and then they develop thinking. So the thinking process is really emphasized a lot more than say the just reading and learning information intake. So this is also our school's philosophy, that information is somehow, there's a limited number of information you can give to the students. What is so much more important is to teach the student how to learn and how to pursue researches and so on, and how to live. So this is the idea of our education, and this is the reading room in our library. And we do hope that one day our school will become world-class, because I believe a lot of Hong Kong people, as well as mainland people, they pursue education abroad. So it's high time we have a Chinese product right here, and people don't need to go abroad to buy an education. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for the wonderful recounting of some truly historical moments to which your father was a part, and indeed a critical part. I have read the book, and you alluded to your relationship with your father a couple of times, being that, for example, one, if a boy can do it, then a girl can do it. And I must admit, I have an affinity with your father, because I live with 5 females. I have a wife, I have 2 daughters, and 2 girl cats. And it's been that way for a long time. So, I believe in the power and the strength of women, and I've taught my daughters that. Now, you had an added responsibility as the eldest daughter. So I'm wondering if you could just give us some hints as to how your relationship with your father perhaps evolved differently to the other siblings.
Well, for one thing, I was very fortunate that I knew him when he wasn't so famous and so busy. So he actually helped me do my homework. But of course, the downside of this is he was very strict and very disciplined, and I was more disciplined than my younger siblings. And also being the eldest, I actually knew him when he walked to the school with me and took a bus to work. So in that way, I was very fortunate. I might be born with a silver spoon in my mouth, but I wasn't spoiled in the sense to take it for granted.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there other questions from the audience? Yes. Do you have a mic?
Yes. Your family, your grandparents, and your family generally, you would say that your family originated from Ningbo, is that right?
Yes.
But if you look at all the sub-ethnic groups in Hong Kong, Cantonese, Hakka, Fukien, etc., in all of them you will find some successful businessmen. But nevertheless, people always point and say that in respect of businessmen being astute, Ningbo is a special place. Can you put your finger on it and say what the reason is? Can you give any reasons? Is it skipping? What is it?
I can say that one thing, Ningbo people are extremely poor. So I still remember visiting Ningbo the first time in 1982. The streets were so dim, so filthy, muddy streets. And so I think, and in comparison, I can only say in comparison, I was the CPPCC member of Heilongjiang, and the subculture there is totally different. People there have a good life in Heilongjiang. By contrast, Ningbo people don't drink. They just know how to work. There's no natural resources. Heilongjiang has coal, has oil. So when a place is rather wealthy in resources, they are a bit spoiled. But Ningbo, compared to southern China, Guangdong, our crop can grow, the rice crop is twice a year. Now in Canton you can have 3 crops a year. So when resources are less, and nowadays it's not Ningbo, it's the Wenzhou people. The Wenzhou people are even harder workers because they are even poorer than the Ningbonese. So somehow when people don't have it, they really have to use their hands and their brains to create things and to create from nothing. And all I can say, these people are a lot more creative. And in business, you do need creativity to solve problems. So I would say poverty and hard work can drive people along. And also the thrift. Even my grandmother, I remember her making shoes for my father from a stack of cloth, and then you stitch it together and you put a piece of black cloth on top. So that's the state of affair when they had to make their own shoes. And same as Wenzhou people, they are the Ferragamo of China. They make shoes. And so, but they are very tough. They can manage anything. By little example, for example, my mother just changed the curtains. Instead of throwing it to the garbage bin, she collected all these curtains and made golf bags for travel bags. That was way before the production of that product. So they're naturally very creative people.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Yes, over here.
Professor Sohmen, I'm not sure how many events you've done, but I personally missed your book launch in Asia Society, and I also missed it in HSBC main office. I finally make it tonight. Question about the books. Why pick this time to publish this book after Mr. Y.K. Pao already passed away for some time and out of your busy schedule? And what is your vision with the books? And I mean, I personally read. It's quite uncommon with amateur author do so many book launch. And when will be the Chinese version?
The Chinese version was before.
Oh, really?
It was published some 6 years ago. But there's no reason except my time. The only time I can really sit down and write my book is during Chinese New Year's. So that's 10 days. And it took me 6 years to write my Chinese. And it took another 2 years to personally translate it into English. And I had wanted it much earlier to get in the 10th anniversary of the return of Hong Kong, but I did not manage. In fact, the reason I started the school was in 2007, the 10th anniversary of the return of Hong Kong to China. That's when I gave this non-profit school to China.
Thank you. Is there another question over here?
But thank you for trying to come to my other book launch.
Yes.
Professor Sohmen, you might be rude, but throughout all those years, did your father have the slightest hint that he would be happier to have a son? Or should that be the case? That what do you think would that be the change of in his life or the life of your family?
I'll tell you one subculture, talking about Ningbo subculture. A family, the Ningbonese are very much like the Chu Chao family. To put you in context, a woman is second-class citizen at home. If you don't produce a son, you are third-class citizen. So in a family, I actually remember my aunt, who got married later than my mother, rose up to a higher rank, which was was assigned a maid and not required to wash, do laundry or cook, because she had a son. But my mother, because she couldn't produce a son, was always in the kitchen and was doing laundry when we live as a large family. So I am sure he's only a human being. He probably wanted a son in order to be able to have his wife enjoy maids.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Professor Sohmen. And actually, we really thank you for giving us such a talk and sharing with us the precious memory of Mr. Pao, and which means a lot to us, especially to the home people, and to me from Ningbo, and also from the Ningbo University. Yeah. And I'm really glad to meet you here and have such a precious opportunity here. So besides, we have known a lot from your talk that Mr. Pao is a very successful businessman and in a shipping industry. So we would like to know a little bit more about what Mr. Pao like as an ordinary father, and the moment you impress you most when it is filled with paternal love. Thanks.
But I don't know whether this book has sort of family moments. But he was actually a very great sense of humor, as I said. Very caring. He's very demanding, so he always wants the best out of everybody around him, whether it's his children or his staff. And you can see in page 207, the epilogue, how he performed in his late years. He started turning to be a magician. And he turned to be a magician just to entertain his grandchildren. And so he is, in the normal sense, just very, very ordinary in that sense. You can see all the subsequent pictures with his grandchildren. Every Christmas he gathers us around, and he tells jokes, and then 比戏法. And you can see even his self-portrait, which I thought was quite amusing, because in the book, his mind never leaves work, even when he's entertaining the family. I think in the picture there is a ship and there's an airplane. The ship is shipping. What is amazing, he didn't have buildings, the real estate part, but he certainly had his ship and his dragon air in his mind when he did his self-portrait.
Thank you. Of all the famous people that you met alongside your father and say beyond, who is it that impressed you most, and for what reason?
The famous people?
Famous people, yeah. You've talked about your father's relationship with Deng Xiaoping and Margaret Thatcher, but from your perspective, who impressed you the most?
I wouldn't say there's one most. I would say in different respect, I have a whole spectrum, going from the amazing determination and the decisiveness of Margaret Thatcher, Deng Xiaoping's amazingly brevity and economy of words, and yet communicating what he wanted to the people underneath him, to even Michael Jackson. I went to his show a couple weeks ago, and I found his creativity amazing. So there's and listening to Wagner last week, I find his music I always find something new in his music. To Mozart's operas, to dance. In fact, my hobby is ballroom dancing, and so when I watch some of the top competitors, I just find it quite amazing, like the current champions. So it just...
A wide spectrum.
Wide spectrum.
Yeah.
Yes, and also I greatly admire Sir Murray McAuliffe, how he created the middle class in Hong Kong. So all these, and I can think of more.
But our time is running out. We have a few more questions. Yes, sir. This one here.
How did Sir Pao build up his connections and also credentials so successfully in Japan, with Japan, I mean? He was a great communicator. He had charisma. And how did he build it up? Of course, what his great skill is how to use the people around him. He had a great lieutenant in one of my uncles who learned Japanese, extremely aggressive, and great negotiator. So my father positioned him in Japan. And with the Japanese, he understood the Japanese mentality. And he also was able to seize the opportunity, which was the timing that Japan needed foreign currency.
because of a lot of policies which are favorable to foreigners at that time. I mean, foreign flags. He was able to negotiate these because the foreign flags can get credit in the bank and also run foreign staff on the ships at a much lower cost. So he was able to use all these policies and opportunities.
Thank you. And there was one at the back there.
Yes, hello. Hi, Professor Pao Sohmen. Thank you very much for sharing a very intimate rendition, too, of YK Pao's life and your father and your relationship with him. I was wondering, and perhaps this is somewhat of a speculative question, too, but if your father was alive today and reading the book, is there anything that perhaps he would have either been surprised that you included or talked about? Or perhaps on the flip side of that, is there anything, if he was writing it as an autobiography himself, that he might have chosen to include that perhaps wasn't included?
He would probably have said, "What a waste of time." That's the flip side of my answer to you. He said, "Go and do some 踏实一点的工作." Just thinking up there.
Was he at all a religious man in any way?
No, he was not. He was very, very pragmatic. And in fact, he's not very idealistic. And perhaps I have that to thank. Because if he were idealistic, he would have been kept in China and would not have left the communist country. It's in the book about my uncle, who was underground Communist Party member and who left a whole stack of books about communism for my father to read. Had he been more idealistic, he would have read those books and be converted, and he would have been in China, and I might not be here.
And the book, of course, is YK Pao, my father, and I believe it's on sale at the back of the room, heavily discounted, just tonight only, if I'm not incorrect. So please, once again, please thank Professor Pao Sohmen. Thank you. We have a very small souvenir. It's a reproduction of one of the first books ever produced in Hong Kong. It's the Hong Kong Almanac of 1846 from our rare book collection. So I hope you enjoy that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Thank you.